Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. So glad you could all be with us tonight. Good evening. Welcome to our 2024 Criminal Legal Update webinar. If any of you can safely access the chat, please take a moment, introduce yourself, drop your name, where you're calling in from tonight. If you're with an organization, please let us know who you're with. And if there's something you want to share with us that you're looking forward to in 2024, we'd be excited to hear that as well. Good evening to those that are joining us. We're just doing introductions in the chat. Looks like we've got folks from all over the state here. Traverse City. Wow, I'm so grateful to see so many groups from all across the state. We're all here for one shared common goal of ending mass incarceration. We'll get started in just a few moments. We'll let a few more folks log in here. Welcome, Michigan Justice Fund. Josie, thank you for joining us. So glad you all could be here tonight. This is so exciting to have such a wonderful turnout. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started and introduce myself. My name is Jen Zane, and I'm the communications coordinator here at the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. The collaborative goal is all about helping people advance together. We know that we can accomplish so much more together as a collaborative, as a group, than any of us can accomplish on our own, any single person or any org. And that's why we're here tonight, to bring all of you together for this dynamic panel where we'll hear from 7 different organizations across the state, where they'll discuss what they're working on, campaigns that are on the forefront in 2024, how you can be a part of that. And we'll deep dive into that into 2 separate breakout room sessions, where we'll do these deeper dive conversations, really dig into things together in a community discussion. In the chat, we see these folks from all across the state. We're all from different backgrounds. We have different perspectives. We're all in different geographical locations, but we've come together tonight for one shared mission, for one shared common goal of ending mass incarceration. So let's jump over to the agenda here that's open, just so everyone knows what to expect this evening. After this introduction, we're going to go into setting the context. My colleague Chuck will discuss the legislative landscape, overall lay of the land for 2024. We'll then jump into our issue updates, where we'll discuss, each of the panelists here tonight will discuss their campaigns. We've got 7 to hear from, so stay tuned, lots of great information. And after those campaigns, the deep dive breakout room session. We'll come back for closing remarks, and we'll get everybody out by 8:30. So does that sound good? All right, so we'll just cover some simple community agreements. We request tonight that folks move up and move back. If you're one of the folks that is normally a little more active in these conversations, we ask that you step back tonight, give space for some other voices that are more quieter that are at the table. We have a lot to cover tonight in a short time period. We ask that folks respect the clock and respect the mic, one speaker at a time. And then above all, take care of yourself. So if you need to step away, please feel free to do so. Next slide. So I'd like to start us off tonight by introducing my colleague, Chuck Warpahusky. He's our program director at the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration, and he's going to discuss setting the context for the legislative landscape and our budget advocacy work. Chuck, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen. So when you hear from our panelists about the amazing work that they're doing to try to end mass incarceration here in Michigan, I want to start by saying they're going to tell you what's happening right now. And hopefully in a couple of weeks, that's going to change. We're going to have some progress. And if you want to stay informed on all of the steps that are happening, all of the legislative updates across the year, one tool we've got is we maintain a legislative tracker for all the issues. We send out emails roughly weekly when the legislature's in session. So if you want to get those emails, drop us an email. We'll be happy to include you. If your inbox is full, you just want to be able to track it down as needed, you can go ahead and access that on the website. If you're saying, wait, don't click forward, I'm going to lose the link, we're going to send you all these slides, all the links, all of the speakers' contact information is all going to be there. So that's part of how we're trying to help you connect with these organizations. So to set the landscape, I just want to talk a little bit about what it takes to win a policy change in Michigan. Many of you have heard the School Rock the Schoolhouse Rock version of how a bill becomes a law, right? Like it starts in a committee, and then the committee has a hearing, there's a vote in the committee, and then from the committee it goes to the full House or Senate. They do that both times, and then the governor signs it, and then we've got a law. And that's true. And one of the things that that teaches us is if we want to win, we need majorities. We need a majority of supporters at the level of the full House and at the level of the full Senate, but that's not enough. We also need majorities at the committee levels, because if the committee, there's some exceptions here, but in general, if the committees don't vote yes, the bill doesn't move forward. So we need a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate, and we need a majority in the relevant committees. Different bills you're going to hear about tonight are in different committees, so it varies. But in general, they're often in the Criminal Justice Committee or the Senate Civil Rights, Judiciary, and Criminal Justice Committees. But even that's not enough, because how do you decide which bill actually gets a hearing in the committee? At each step of the process, there is a gatekeeper. They look kind of like this, holding that no sign saying, no, only the bills that I say get a vote, only the bills that I say get a hearing. And if the gatekeepers aren't on board, the bills don't move forward. So those gatekeepers are standing there ready to stop, decide what moves forward at the committee level, what gets a hearing, what gets a vote. And after they get through the committees, there's a different set of gatekeepers at the House and at the Senate. The Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, they're also serving as gatekeepers to decide what actually makes it to the floor, what actually gets a vote for the whole House or Senate. So in addition to needing majorities in the House and Senate, in addition to needing the majorities in the committees, we also need to be able to get these gatekeepers on board if we want to be able to win on our issues. And then finally, the governor is the final gatekeeper of this process. What currently she, sometimes he, decides to sign or not sign, that's the final step of the process. I bring this up because it's important to, if we want to win, we have to understand our gatekeepers. Sun Tzu said, know yourself, know your enemy, 100 battles, 100 victories. I don't think the gatekeepers are necessarily our enemies, but we have to understand what motivates them. And in some ways, they are making the same calculations that any legislator is. I'm going to put the best spin on this. We're going to assume good intent here. But one thing that they're asking is, do I personally support it? Do I think this is a good policy? If they think it's a bad policy, they're likely to block it. They're also thinking, but it's not 100%, because they're also asking, do my constituents support the bill? Maybe they think it's a bad idea, but their constituents are really behind it, so maybe they'll get behind it because that's how democracy works. So every lawmaker is asking these two things. But the gatekeepers, because their job, they're put there by the party that's in power, they're asking some other questions. They're asking, does it have the votes to pass? Are they going to waste their time having hearings and votes in the committee, not taking up other issues, right? There's more bills than there's time to deal with. So if it doesn't have a chance to pass, they might say, this isn't worth our time. There are other things that are a higher priority. They're also asking, will it help or hurt my party's chance of being able to maintain the majority? Right? When you look at the platforms of a political party, Democratic or Republican, there's a long list of things they want to get done. Yes, about the criminal legal system, but also about schools, also about jobs, also about agriculture, also about the environment. And they're trying to get all this done. And so if they feel like this is going to cause so many problems for them, they may say no. Or if they think, hey, this is going to really win with the voters, they're going to say yes. Finally, especially in 2024, when there's a presidential election, they're trying to think about, is this going to put a good shine on the party for the presidential candidate politics? Or is this going to be a barrier to the presidential politics? Are we going to lose electoral votes because now all of a sudden the party we're in looks worse because of taking a controversial vote? You don't have to agree with the decisions that the gatekeepers are making, but these are some of the things that are driving what they decide to let through the process. And it's especially hard in Michigan right now. A lot of folks have said, hey, there's a Democratic trifecta. We should be able to get a lot of things through. And there's truth in that. But also, it's been a very narrow majority. Up until the first of the year, up until the last election, in the House, it was 56-54. That means if even one Democrat, if the Republicans stand united, and even one Democrat takes a look at a piece of legislation and decides that they don't like it, they personally oppose it, a friend of theirs told them it was a bad idea, they're maybe in a district, if they're a Democrat in a district that Trump won before, and they're worried that their ability to stay in power is really tenuous. If just one changes their vote from a yes to a no, it goes from 56-54 to 55-55. Things don't move forward. So the challenge of getting a majority with such a razor thin majority, partisan majority, is very difficult. Now, there are Democrats who support and oppose our policies. There are Republicans who support or oppose our policies. We're polarized times. They tend to fight, but it's not, sometimes you can lose votes but gain votes. But this is part of the challenge of trying to get to those majorities in this moment. And as I said, in November, two of those Democrats in the House left the House to become mayors of their cities. So now instead of a 56-54 majority, it's a 54-54 even split until the special election in April fills those spots. Even with this, that narrow majority, we've been able to win some good things in 2023. The big thing is a series of juvenile justice reforms. We could spend, if we were going to talk through those, there's better people than me to talk through them, but a lot of things happened in terms of diverting young people from juvenile detention, eliminating non-restitutionary fines and fees. So people aren't coming out with enormous debt after they've been in the youth justice system. Expanding funding for alternatives to detention, expanding defense, appellate defense, so kids can have a good lawyer for their appeal, having an office of child advocate, a lot of things that were in this package. It was bipartisan, it moved fast, and a lot of really good things got done when it comes to juvenile justice. In the budget, there was some funding for violence intervention, expanding access to college and prisons and putting things in place for education in prisons. Some folks have been supportive, some folks have been opposed to prison body cams, but Citizens for Prison Reform on this thinks that they're an important, who's on the call today, thinks they're an important part of accountability for staff at MDOC and fought hard to get those into the budget. And then Nation Outside, who you'll hear from later, fought really hard to get pilot funds for their trauma-informed peer-led reentry pilot program. And if that takes off, it will revolutionize reentry services for people coming home from prison. And finally, there was a win on getting automatic voter registration when people come home from prison. They can opt out, but now the default is you're coming home, we're registering you to vote as part of your welcome and reentry process. And we're almost there on a sentencing commission. Bills have passed both the House and Senate. They're a little bit different, so they need to get reconciled and move forward. So that's an almost win. I wish we could claim it, but it's almost there. So that's where we are so far with budget organizing, with the legislative process. We've got to get those majorities. We've got to convince the gatekeepers that this is both good politics and good policy. On some things, we've been able to get there. What you'll be hearing from today are a lot of the unfinished work from this legislative season, and some of the bigger changes. What's here? The juvenile justice is game changer. A lot of the other stuff is important, but smaller wins. We haven't been able to get that intersection of politics and policy on a lot of the things that you'll hear from today, and that's why you're here, to help be able to increase the voice, increase the advocacy for those other issues. Last thing I'm going to talk about, and then we'll hand the mic over to Liz with ACLU Michigan talking about bail reform. Last night was the State of the State address. In 2 weeks, I believe it is, on February 6th, the governor is going to present her agenda. And then from then through July, there's going to be a big fight about what what programs get funded and what don't. Part of what we've done at MI-CEMI is we've pulled together a collaborative budget organizing group to push for a variety of investments that help end mass incarceration, improve public safety, and reduce racial disparities. Things like funding community violence intervention, alternatives to the police that can prevent violence from happening on the front end rather than just having a cop to respond after violence has already happened. Things like continuing to expand that prison access, that education access in prison. Eric Anderson from Organization of Exonerees is on the call tonight. One of the things that Organization of Exonerees is pushing for in that is to expand funding for conviction integrity units. So there's a variety of pieces there. And what we're going to do is we're going to drop a link to that endorsement letter in the chat in just a little bit. We'd love for you to read more about it. And we'd love for you, if you're personally able to endorse that, add to that sign-on letter. And if you're part of an organization that could sign on there, please endorse that as your organization as well. And with that, I'm going to let Jen introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Chuck. So next we're going to be hearing from Liz Bulk, she's the West Michigan Policy Strategist for the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan. Liz, we welcome you.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Chuck. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be with you tonight. Tonight, I'm going to very briefly sort of try to explain why it's really important that we reform our pretrial cash bail system in our state. And apologies if you can hear dogs and kids in the background. This is, I mean, I know everybody's sort of used to this lifestyle now with Zoom, but it's bedtime. So right now there's a bill package pending in the House currently. It's in the Criminal Justice Committee, and we've yet to have a hearing on it. It was introed in May of 2023. And really what this bill would try to do is, I'll just sort of like run through the biggest obstacles, the biggest issues with our system as it stands. And then if we have more time, probably more in the breakout session, we can talk more about what these bills would do to that system. So the first thing is kind of explaining what is bail. There's actually a lot of misconceptions about what bail is. Bail is actually not punishment. It's not a fine. It's meant it's a certain amount of money that a court will set in order to ensure that a defendant will return to court hearings. That's it. So we're talking about before somebody is convicted or pled guilty to a crime. This is somebody who's simply accused. And in our country and in our state, we are assumed innocent until proven guilty. So these are people without convictions. And what we're seeing in Michigan and across the country is that people who are poor are having to sit in jail behind bars, whereas somebody who's accused of the exact same crime, if they have assets, if they have money, if they have means, they're able to post bail and get out of jail while they're trying to fight their charge. In Michigan, on any given day, more than 50% of the total jail population in our state is comprised of pretrial detainees. So again, this is more than half of the people in our jails on any given day have not been found guilty of the crime that they're sitting accused for. So the main things I just want to sort of hit home. One is that, people in this system are punished for being poor. And we think that hopefully everybody can agree that having the right to exist freely and fight your charges should not be based on whether or not you can afford to bail out of jail. And it's also inefficient and ineffective at assessing risk of somebody, whether or not they're able to come back to court or whether or not they are a risk to the community. It's simply just not an effective system. So I think that's about my time. So I'll stop now, but happy to chat more with folks if they want to come to the breakout.
Thank you, Liz. We appreciate that so much. Next up, we have Ronnie Waters, the Community Engagement Specialist with Safe and Just Michigan. He's here tonight to talk to us about ending juvenile life without parole. Ronnie?
Hello, everybody. As you say, I'm Ronnie Waters, Safe and Just Michigan, and we're ending life without parole in the state of Michigan. Next slide, please. Yeah, we feel that the United States and Iran are the only two countries in the world who still sentence kids to die in prison. Back in 2012, Miller versus Alabama said that you couldn't give juvenile mandatory life without parole. It took quite a few years for the state of Michigan to make that retroactive, but they have, and a lot of juveniles are getting resentenced. There were 28 states now that are against sentencing juveniles to life without parole. Michigan's not one of them. Most of these states are ruby red, like Texas, West Virginia, Arkansas, Kentucky. So Michigan has to pick up their game. Next slide, please. Lack of capacity. We all know that children make bad decisions. So that's one of the reasons why they can't join the military or can't even legally be married unless you have consent from an adult. So why should we allow people to send these same children to prison to die? We never know how a child is going to turn out. So it just doesn't make sense to give them the harshest sentence off the top. You know, we have to see who that person who is going to become. Strong reason not to sentence children to die in prison. Recidivism rate is really low for all returning juveniles into society. This chart has 1 out of 181. I think one more has offended, but he had a small amount of drugs. And we're upset with that one more, but real low level of recidivism. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Carve-outs. There are many people who think that the best way to get these bills passed is by carving out or throwing some kids under the bus. We're completely against that. Never going to throw anyone under the bus. 10 years is the floor of the bills that we're trying to get passed. And that just means that you're eligible after 10 years. It doesn't mean that you're going home after 10 minutes. It's eligible that you could see the parole board and possibly state a convincing case in front of them to be released. Next slide, please. Okay, that's all the slides that we have. So if there are questions on juvenile justice in the chat, I'll be happy to answer all of those questions. And we do have a new ruling from the Michigan Court of Appeals that making like 260 more people under the age of 19 eligible to be resentenced. Happy to talk about all of that in the breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm looking forward to jumping into your breakout room to discuss that. Next up, we have Jack Wagner, the president of the Michigan Justice Advocacy. He's here tonight to discuss the Good Time campaign. Jack, I'll let you take it.
Thanks, Jen. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So let's start with what is the good time policy that we're all talking about. When we speak about good time here at Michigan Justice Advocacy, we are talking about a policy that we introduced in 2021, which is a 30-day credit for every 30 days served without any misconducts, major misconducts or class 1 misconducts. We don't believe in carve-outs either. I thought somebody chatted about that. And so this policy would apply to anyone, regardless of the charge. It just, we could not address the life sentence problem. So the sentences that our good time policy is proposing to target are those who have numerical sentences. Now, if someone were to be resentenced from life to some numerical sentence, I believe they could also enjoy the benefits of the good time policy that we're proposing. And then the final right-hand side bullet point that I should point out is that we would like this policy to be applied retroactively. So from the moment someone has set foot into custody within an MDOC facility, we believe you should go back and review their institutional record, because we believe the truth in sentencing policy over the last 2 decades has been a failure. And therefore, if someone has demonstrated historically that they have complied with the rules and the regulations and policies of the department, I think that will show up in their historical record of misconducts, and they should be given credit. I've spoken with many incarcerated individuals that tell me, Jack, I've been ticket-free for 15 years, for 20 years. I think that needs to be recognized, incentivized, and rewarded. So let's go to the next slide, because I always like talking about the history of good time. I wish I could claim credit for this succinct timeline, but I like reusing it. So whoever created it, I think safe and just, thank you. This timeline shows at the top on the left side that in 1978, there were 80 assaultive offenses that were carved out, and through a proposal effort, a ballot initiative effort, those 80 assaultive offenses in 1978 were voted on by the people of the state of Michigan to not be eligible for good time. The other categories of offenses, the second timeline below, they were still eligible as of 1978 when Proposal B passed. So Proposal B, and coupled with an increase in incarceration rates and overcrowding, led to some volatile, inflammatory situations in prison. There were some prison revolts, and the legislature recognized the lack of good time was one of the big reasons why there were uprisings in the prison. So in 1982, our very own legislature ended up basically overriding the will of Proposal B by reinstating or creating a disciplinary credit system, which would give those in that 80 assaultive offense category some credits. The good time credits were a progressive scale. They walked up. First couple of years, you were eligible for several days per month, until finally by 20 years, you were good for 15 days per month. Throughout the 90s, we ended up in a situation where truth in sentencing became the rule of the land. And since that 2000 timeframe, for the last 2 decades plus, we have been fighting truth in sentencing. And that's the situation. I believe I might be out of time. Is that what I'm hearing, Jen? So I should save the rest for breakouts. Thanks for listening, and we'll go to the next presenter.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. We look forward to discussing more in the 2 breakout sessions with you. Next up, we have Natalie Holbrook Combs, the Program Director of American Friends Service Committee Michigan Criminal Justice Program. Natalie's here tonight to discuss second look legislation. Natalie, we're excited to hear from you. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everybody. And MI-CEMI, thanks so much for putting this together. Chuck, could you go to the next slide, please? All right, thanks. So we have this really robust coalition of folks working to pass second look here in Michigan. In April of 2023, Senator Chang introduced a package of bills that would allow people to apply to their sentencing judge or the successor sentencing judge after serving 10 calendar years in prison. And so these are our problems laid out here. We have an aging population. Cost of medical care is very high. They're the only person that can get lifers free right now, people serving life sentences, which as of 2022's statistical report for MDOC, there are 4,540 people serving life sentences in Michigan, and 21,457 are serving 10 or more years out of the 32,000 in prison. That's a huge number of people. And so second look will create an avenue to get this aging population out. Next slide, please. So this creates this resentencing route with the judge. It is going to be an application. It's a legal process. There will be lots of input from various parties, and people will be helped along the way. It is not a get out of jail free card. People will have to still go through the process of parole once they're resentenced to a term of years, if they're serving life, or if their sentence is reduced from like a 40-year to a 20-year sentence or something like that. So again, people who've served 10 years are eligible, and it includes life sentences, and there are pretty much no carve-outs in the bill except the language, that the way that the language has been written is that the judge could indeed just say they're not interested at all in looking at an application that comes from somebody who is convicted of a mass shooting, or a couple of domestic violence offenses, some DV cases, but that is not, they're not excluded. The judge just has the wherewithal to say, I'm not interested. Next slide, please. So these are really important statistics. The average age in the prison system in Michigan right now is 51.5 years old. Just so you all know, the National Institute of Health says elderly in prison is 50 to 55, whereas in the general population, the elderly age is 60 to 65. We spend way too much money on corrections, as you see from these slides. We spend way too much money on medical. And people who are serving long time and get released are the least likely to recidivate. This is a statistic of 1.14%. And we are studying this population really closely as they come back, because so many people have been coming back because of Miller cases, and they're not recidivating, they're not going back to prison. And then a third of women or non-binary people are serving 15 years or more. And right now it's actually almost more, half of women are serving 10 years or more in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and we are an extreme outlier in sentencing in Michigan. Next slide, please. So this is a great slide from the Sentencing Project to show how we are an extreme outlier. We have people who've served more than 10 years and were 25 or younger at the time of their crime, 30% in Michigan, and 17% is the national average. And then I think there's one more slide. And this is important for us to look at, because when we look at second look by county, we'll see that Wayne County sends people to prison for the longest periods of time and has the most folks who would be impacted to come back. And so we have a lot of organizing to do in Wayne County and Oakland, but across the state, to get legislators interested in this being a pertinent issue and to get people out of prison who are serving long time. And I am done. We'll talk more in our small group.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. Up next, we have Sharmi Golson with Government Relations for Citizens with Prison Reform and the Open My Door campaign. She's here tonight to discuss the Michigan Department of Corrections Oversight Bill. I will hand it over to her. We're looking forward to hearing about this. Sharmi?
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me, and I apologize for my quality. I had to move closer to the router. Welcome. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everyone that organized this webinar. I'm really honored to be among the folks that are presenting today. So I work with Citizens for Prison Reform. My name's Sharmi Golson, and we are a nonprofit, statewide, grassroots, family-led initiative. Started 10 years ago, actually, during Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, when our founder, Lois, and a handful of other mamas called up the prison where their loved ones were and said, we can come, right? And they said, sure. And then they drove through a crazy snowstorm and they got there and they'd moved their loved ones. And that's when they realized they weren't really working with very ethical department there. And they had to band together and take matters into their own hands. So we provide direct advocacy and support for families with incarcerated loved ones. We're organizing and educating families. We are a family-driven campaign. We have impacted folks looking at everything that we do, and I'm impacted. My son and my now passed on boyfriend were in prison for a long time, but I don't have permission to share their stories, so I don't. And we're advocating for prison policy changes right now as well that reduce harm, improve conditions and safety. And we want to end solitary confinement in Michigan. Next slide, please. So right now we're leading the Open My Door campaign, and that's to end the use of solitary confinement in Michigan the way it's currently defined and in practice. And we're working to implement corrections oversight, which is what I'm doing here tonight with you folks, talking about oversight. We started this process by strengthening the correction ombudsman's office through Senate Bill 493. And we'll be talking about, if you want to help, what you can do regarding that legislation tonight. And we also want to remove restrictions on family visits as punishment for misconduct. So we're doing a bunch of stuff. Next screen, please. I know I don't have to tell you guys any of this, but I did anyways. I apologize. So right now we are having conversations with organizations and legislators about the need for corrections oversight. And we're working to pass Senate Bill 493 as well. That's the beginning of it. But we're kind of getting a temperature reading right now. We're talking, like I said, organizations, community members. There's some education that has to go on before we take this on head on. Next screen, please. So we're going to create, am I out of time? Is that what that means? Maybe let's look at this. And if I am, I'll just talk to, yep, I'm done. Bye. Come to the breakout session. I'll tell you all about it. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Darmy. Appreciate that. All right, up next, we're going to discuss ending prison gerrymandering with Charles Thomas Jr. from the Voting Access for All Coalition. Charles, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you to Chuck for putting this effort together. I've asked Chuck to just flip through the slides as I talk, because all of the slides you will see in the presentation that will be in the breakout room. But what I want to say, first of all, is that I've asked Chuck for permission to inject this into the conversation, which is Chuck and MI-CEMI, along with myself, Black Voters Matter, and Voting Access for All Coalition, is trying to bring all of the organizations together that are engaged in trying to push legislation through and bring us together so that we can go to the legislature as a collaborative, as a coalition, as one voice saying that we need these different pieces of legislation passed. And so if you have interest in becoming a part of that coalition to strengthen your voice, please reach out to Chuck or myself afterwards. But as far as tonight is concerned, I'm here to represent Voting Access for All Coalition and the conversation around prison gerrymandering. We understand that prison gerrymandering is something that incentivizes incarceration and negatively impacts communities that are already marginalized and impacted in ways that bring them into further disrepair. And so I'm not going to say much more about it, other than to say, if you see something on the screen that that piques your interest, please pop your head in so that we can talk about the need to end prison gerrymandering, where bodies are being counted for their political power and their humanity is taken away when it comes to their right to any type of representation. That, in a nutshell, is what prison gerrymandering is all about. But we have a full slide presentation along with a couple of short videos that we want to bring to you so that you can become more aware of what is going on with prison gerrymandering. Last thing I'll say is this in my last 30 seconds is that I am really glad to be here because it gives me an opportunity to hear and learn from people who are experts when it comes to the legislation that they have in hand. And we want to move your expertise forward and join in together with you as you join in together with us. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you so much, Charles. All right, up next we have Nation Outside. discussing the Fair Chance housing campaign. Mr.
Thank you,
Tony
Jen.
Gant.
Yep.
Yeah,
thank you,
Mr. Tony
Jen.
Gant will be here with that. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
I think I'm here. Hey, happy Thursday. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that so many people showed up at the end of a busy workday to kind of hear about how important these issues are. And it's kind of refreshing to see all these people here. So shout out to MI-CEMI and to all the other distinguished presenters this evening. And I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm going to just kind of talk briefly about what the Fair Chance Housing Act is. It's called the Michigan Fair Chance Access to Housing Act, and it's House Bill 4878. And it is currently pending in the Housing Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Small Business and Economic Development Committee in the Michigan House of Representatives. The bill was introduced by Abraham Ayash in 2023. We had a presentation hearing and we had a formal hearing on the bill. We're excited about the progress, and we are hoping that we can get a vote out of committee this year. We talk about this issue as a housing right, And that's really how we would prefer everybody to talk about it. It kind of rubs me the way we treat people who have made mistakes once they're released. Because oftentimes what we tell people is if they do the crime, they'll do the time. But what we never tell people is that we're going to perpetually punish them for the rest of their lives. And that's what we do in the state of Michigan. We perpetually punish people, and we deny them the most fundamental thing they need to get their life back on track. And that's housing, right? And everybody knows it. We did some polling last year, and it showed that 77% of Michiganders understand that people with housing with criminal history, 70%, know that these people will not reoffend. Mr. did a poll in 2021, and the overwhelming majority of people that expressed that they experienced housing discrimination were people with criminal histories. We know it's a problem. We know what the solution is. Please come to the breakout room so we can organize and we can push our lawmakers that we put in office to do the right thing. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Tony. Looks like we're ready to get into our breakout rooms. Just give us a moment to get those queued up here.